everybody, and welcome to another Florida-friendly educational program. We have another noon program today, and our subject today, this is one of the ones that was requested by our listeners. Last week we had fragrantly Florida-friendly, that was a request, and today we have Moonlight Gardens, and so I thought that would be a fun and kind of different program to have. We're going to have some crossovers in some of the plants that we saw last week, but I also tried to bring in some different ones you might not have thought about. I am Lilly Browning. I do work for Hernando County Utilities. I work for the county water department here in Hernando County. And the program that I teach is Florida-friendly landscaping because I am in water conservation. If you'd like a PDF copy of this program sent to you, so you have it in writing, all the different plant suggestions and things such as that, you can email me at LillyB, Lill, 2 L's in the middle, YB at hernandocounty.us. There's another email with which you can reach me as well, and that is Hernando County FFL at hernandocounty.us. Here are the 9 principles of Florida-friendly landscaping. Florida-friendly landscaping is 30 years old this year. We're going to have a program kind of touching on that and celebrating that coming up in April. But all of these principles do work together in all of the classes that I teach. Right plant, right place is going to have a lot to do with today's, as well as attracting wildlife, because that's just kind of happen naturally. And also not attracting the kind of wildlife you don't wish to attract in the evenings. So what we're going to talk about this, a moonlight garden. The garden doesn't have to stop being exciting and fun when the sun goes down. In fact, that is just, when a whole different set, just like a whole different set of humans seem to arise when it's dark out. The same occurs outside there are even some plants that only bloom after dark. But we are also going to discuss plants that, bloom in the daylight, but that can bring a lot more light to your moonlight garden. So we're going to talk about those white and the silver or shimmery plants or flowers that you can bring in to make your moonlight garden a wonderful place to hang out. Plants or flowers with fragrance, specifically after dark. We're going to cover some of those. But, it's not just plants out there. We are really talking about when we want to make the effort to be out there in the evening, we are really expanding our outdoor living space to all hours of the day. So in so doing, you want to talk about the hardscape that's out there. What is hardscape? Hardscape is anything in a garden that is not a plant. So, that could be everything else. And because we are talking about, it's Florida and we're going to be out there in the evening, we got to cover a little bit of mosquito control, or this whole project will be for naught. No one will want to hang out there. So let's get started. First, we need to talk about our zone. We covered this last week as well, because you can fall in love with all the plants and flowers that you want, but if they're not going to do well in this area, you're not going to be very successful. So, I mentioned last week that we have always been, up until very, very recently, all of Hernando County was in horticultural zone 9A. But they have redone the mapping, and this is based on average high temperatures. That's all that the this particular USDA plant hardiness zone is, average high temperatures. There are people out there who maintain other, zones for average low, and also even a humidity one. But what generally people fall back on is this plant hardiness zone, which is based on average high temperature. So what has occurred? Part of Hernando County, now that they redid the averages, is actually in 9B, not 9A. So if you look here where I'm pointing, this is what is left of Hernando County that is actually in 9B. That's all the east side, all of Ridge Manor, all of Hillendale, all of that, the new Trilby Crossing, if you're in that new subdivision, Sherman Hills, things like that. Also southeast. So we're looking at Massarytown, Avalon, Trillium, perhaps even around the Anderson Snow Park area. You're all 9B. The rest, except for this little tiny piece over here, which would be Arapika, seems to be 9A, except there's a itsy bitsy northwestern corner, which is nearly Citrus County, and you are 9B, I think because you're probably so far out in the coast. There's not a huge difference between 9A and 9B. But if you're looking at, if it begins with 9B and goes further south, there may be some issues that you'll need to consider with frost protection, things like that. If it's absolute end of the zone area is 9A, maybe it's a bit too hot in your 9B area. So I'm going to discuss the zones and the type of plants that you can bring in your yard. Of course, we want to remember principle number 1, right plant, right place. So we always have to consider the plant's needs before our desires, or our desires will not come to fruition because the plant is just not going to do well where it's not meant to grow. If it needs to be in shade, it needs to be in shade. If it needs a certain amount of sun each hour, certain amount of hours of sun each day, it needs that. Also take into consideration its watering needs, plant things together that have similar watering needs, and also its mature size. Now these Moonlight Gardens that we're going to discuss, you could build one on 5 acres if you're really ambitious. You could build one on an apartment balcony. Whatever works for you, however you want to do it. This program is just to give you some ideas. There are thousands of plants with white flowers. We could be here all day if I brought them all out. But I just want to show you a few that might inspire you, to go the direction you want to go with your Moonlight Garden. So this number 1 is this fringe tree. There is a native variety of a fringe tree, the Chionanthus virginicus. And that's why I put the native sign down here, because one of the varieties is native if you look for that. There's also a pygmy and just a regular Chinese fringe tree. They're going to have white spring flowers. This is what we're looking at right now, are ghostly white flowers. So, and I think they, shed the flowers in, nice snowy kind of movements, kind of like a Japanese garden kind of thing. So that would be very attractive. This is another thing you want to think of, just like in any garden, in our Moonlight Garden. Stagger the bloom time. So you have someone who's the star all the time, so you have spring flowers, summer, fall, and winter, if you can, so that there's somebody on stage, being the star of the show all the time. Here's your basic southern magnolia. And what I have added here, if they have wonderful aromas, you're going to see this little girl here. I think I'll call her Fragrant Felicia, is going to remind us here that these are also very fragrant flowers. Now, magnolias are mostly fragrant during the day, but they can be pleasantly fragrant in the evening. Your southern magnolia is your native. There are other types. There's a little gem. There's many different types, not all necessarily native, but they're going to bring that, nice Gothic kind of feel, to your southern garden with the beautiful aromas, as well as the nice big white flowers. What you could do with these, which would be kind of fun, is if you have crystal bowls or something that you put on tables and have the flowers float on them while you have some kind of evening event out in your garden. So that's just something to think about, our magnolias. Now, I bet you weren't even considering this one. This is a native of oak leaf hydrangea. This is going to be one of your shade plants. It really loves the shade, and it looks very interesting even in the day, even when it's not blooming its white flowers, just because of the leaves. The leaves are very large and they're kind of very like maple leaf shaped. So this is very attractive even when it's not blooming. But we are going to have these big white columnar kind of poofball flowers. We're not going to have much success. I mean, you may in a pot with a very controlled soil for a few years with the French hydrangeas. But our native hydrangeas are white, so that it's perfect for your moonlight garden to bring in a little bit more light. It blooms in the shade. It says it's for zones 8B through 9. When it says just 9, that means all of 9, so A or B. So it should do well here. It's interesting to me that it says 8B and not 8A, because that's where Florida starts, I believe, is with 8A. Because I've seen this blooming in Virginia. I've seen it at Monticello. So, it can bloom further north. So it should do very well in our area. Here's another thing I think would be a really cool addition to your moonlight flower, these crinum lilies. They're going to bloom. There's different varieties. This is like a swamp or a spider lily. They're going to bloom pretty much anytime it's warm, off and on, having different blooms. And I think it would bring in, a really cool look. It does like a lot of water, hence, their swamp lily name, but you still don't need to do too much. Just make sure that, when they start looking wilty, that you give them some water and put them by the other plants that also appreciate good amount of water. Maybe some white azaleas, which I don't even have on this list, but you can get like dwarf varieties of azaleas that bloom twice a year. They bloom in the fall as well, and they have a lot of those in white, so that they would do pretty well together because they have the same kind of water needs. And these do okay-ish in partial shade, just like azaleas. Here's another lily, rain lily or zephyr lily. Kind of hard to find this. I mean, they basically grow where they want to. If you can check out the Florida Wildflower Foundation, and through them there's a growers cooperative, to see if they have any seeds for these rain lilies. But generally they pop up where they want to, but if you can find them to bring to your yard, that would be a great addition of the white flowers. They bloom in late spring, at least here in Hernando County, right as the blue flowers of spring are finishing. That means your blue lupine, your Florida blue eyes, all those kind of, you might want to call them weeds, but wildflowers that pop up that have the blue hues. They're coming up this time of year. Right about the time they're finishing off, we get a couple of rains and you see patches of these rain lilies. So that would be a great addition to find out if you can find seed for those. Do not dig them up, from wherever they're growing in the wild. It won't be successful for you to transplant that way, and then you'll disrupt where they were growing. This is a fantastic native shrub, this Walters viburnum. I took this picture where it's growing wild in my neighborhood, at least for now, until, you know, another house gets built there. It has these wonderful winter through spring flowers. They're already done. They were blooming last week. That must have been the last week that, you know, that their show was on, because I went to get some pictures last night and all the flowers are gone. So, but they're going to be one of the very first things to bloom as early as January. They make a good screening hedge as well. They kind of thicket. You probably can get some from native plant nurseries that may have been bred to be, you know, a little more well-behaved than the wild thicketing ones, but they're going to grow pretty tall and make great screening for you. Wildlife love these. It's a great plant to bring in to attract wildlife. And I just happen to think it's a great plant to see near the moon. You know, I took this picture, probably, it wasn't quite dark yet, because I didn't have a real good camera yet, so I couldn't capture the moon very well unless it wasn't dark. Now I have a better camera. But I just think that, you know, the white flowers and how it looks through there, here's a close-up of what the flowers look like, that you'll have a much better, or you have a, you know, it's going to look really nice with the moon and in the evening. And does have a little bit of fragrance, not a whole lot. If we're going to have a moon garden, we should have a moon flower. This grows on a vine for zones 9 and 10. It has late summer through winter, so it has a pretty long blooming period. It's not one of your spring bloomers. It's, you know, just about any other time. Going into almost fall through winter. It's not a native, but it smells very nice, and it will start blooming 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening, and, you know, last probably till around midnight or so. And it's kind of like the opposite of a morning glory. It's an evening glory, and then it'll be done. And, you know, that's it for that flower. But it has many flowers and is a great vining plant. Here's our jasmine, Confederate jasmine, also called star jasmine. This has a lot of aroma in the day and in the evening. Now, I mentioned last week with this in our fragrantly Florida friendly that, you know, I have a sister who is overwhelmed by the smell of jasmine. It's too much for her. So keep that in mind. If you have, you know, someone who is just overwhelmed, it actually gives her a headache. Buy some of these really strong things, you know. You don't want to say, oh, look at this lovely garden I built, but you can't come because it's too much for you. So keep in mind your audience as well. And this has spring. It really has spring through summer flowers. Okay, I mentioned last week we had the talk about roses on our fragrantly Florida friendly. The talk about roses is basically, if you are a rosarian, if you are in love with roses and you are willing, because it's your hobby and your love, to spend time, chemicals, and money to make these, you know, roses successful, you can grow them in Florida. Only some of the roses would be, you know, considered low maintenance or, you know, ergo Florida friendly. So, you know, not saying anything against roses, we're just saying they're hard to grow in Florida. And especially through the summer months, you're going to be putting fungicides on them every week. So, and, you know, you're going to, if that's what you want to do and you're willing to commit the time, that's fine. But when we're talking about roses, there are a few out there that are less maintenance. So if you're going to try and stay, you know, Florida friendly, And we still want to bring in some roses. What they recommend are the antique roses, or this OGR stands for old growth rose. So, the definition of an antique rose is it was a rose that was around before 1867. When they say antique, they mean antique. So here are some of the antique white roses. I have, a climber, one of the climber white roses. I don't do anything at all to it. And it's got, the little white roses. In fact, one time I cut it down to the ground because my husband was going to take the lattice work that it was climbing away, and he never did, and it came back just like I had done nothing. So that's the kind of roses I like to have, the ones that are not high maintenance. I don't have to have a high maintenance relationship with them. But here are some of the white antique roses you might want to look for. The Jatcher, Forciana, La Marque, I don't know if I'm saying these right, Sombruril, Souvenir de Malmaison, Lady Banks, or the Wild or McCartney rose. Sometimes they call some of these white climbers rambling roses or cracker roses. Those kind of things you can look for. And this is a picture of the Lady Banks in white roses. So that's the kind of white roses you might want to think about bringing in if you don't want to have a whole lot of work to have to do. Here's another vining and flowering plant, and it's a native, and it smells wonderfully sweet. I've even heard like sugar cookies. The Stokes aster, and some of the hybridized varieties you can find would be Alba. Alba means white. Silver moon, or the native perennial, the Stokessia laevis. So those are the ones you want to look for, or just find, look for Stokes asters that come in white. And they'll vine pretty aggressively, and they are going to bloom. I don't have that on here. They're going to bloom in the winter, like around Christmas time, and hence the relation to sugar cookies as well. So, if you're thinking of having maybe a Christmas outdoor gathering or a New Year's outdoor gathering, this is something to really think about adding to that garden. Can't talk about white aromatic flowers in the South without bringing up your gardenias. They can be very picky, but I know people who get them to grow and do just fine. They're for zones 8 through 10, and they're going to have your spring through summer flowers. Just a little hint, these are ones you might want to keep away from the house. If you are like 90% of Floridians and have a blockhouse, a cement blockhouse, they don't like that higher lime that is leaching, next to the house. So if you've tried it before and weren't lucky, that could be why. So keep that like at the edge of the garden, away from the house for that reason. Now here's an old standby. We see plenty of these crepe myrtles, and I think the white crepe myrtles, which are called Natchez. See, now you've learned something you didn't know before. When you look at all the white crepe myrtles, you're going to say, oh, your name is Natchez. Okay. And one thing I've noticed about the white crepe myrtles, see if this happens. This is a good time to test my theory, my anecdotal theory. See if it happens. They're going to bloom first. The white ones are going to bloom before your pink ones and your light purple ones, and certainly before any of your really wild new varieties that they have out there. I don't know why. Maybe they're just less hybridized. Maybe it has something to do with the white color. I don't know, but they always bloom first. But I think a line of these or rows of these in your moon garden would be perfect with their beautiful white flowers, which are going to last, May through November or December sometimes. And even when these are deciduous, even when they do lose all the flowers and lose all the leaves, they have very, very, oh, come on. I'm gonna make it come up. Very interesting, there it is, bark. So if you don't over prune these and make them try to fit in spaces they don't fit in and look all gnarled up, if you prune them correctly, and there's all sorts of information from UF online of how to correctly prune a crepe myrtle. I even have a video of it on way back on my Facebook, but also on Hernando County Government YouTube. You prune them correctly, they have very nice winter form. They're going to look fine even when they're naked. You know, they're going to have a lot of attraction to add to your garden. And string these with some little LED lights, and you've got, you know, a very attractive look going on for that garden. Here's one that says zones 9 through 11. Generally, it's usually 9B through 11, this natal plum, but it has year-round flowers. Don't see a lot of it. So, you know, maybe see if you can find some and experiment with them in your yard. And they also have a very nice, sweet, you know, aroma to them. Here's another native that you probably hadn't even considered. It can get kind of leggy and bushy sometimes, but other times it just grows fantastic. It's a salt bush, and it's going to get full of all this fluffy, cottony flowers, inflorescence, basically, that, you know, ends up blowing around in around about September, October. So, you know, that adds a nice, like, ghostly kind of look to your yard that time of year. So that might be something, you know, to consider to bring into your yard. You can find it, it grows wild around my yard, but you can find it at native nurseries. It's going to get pretty tall, not overly tall, but 15 or so feet tall. So it's a great little tree to have there. And this is another native. This is going to need, if you have kind of an area that maybe holds some water or stays moist, because this button bush with its nice aroma, I've only seen it growing wild literally in the water, in swamps. So, but they do sell it at native nurseries to put in your landscape. So it's going to have spring through summer, these little button flowers. These are not representatives of the coronavirus. That is not their intention. They existed long before that, but they have very dark green leaves. I think it would make a very attractive addition. If you have a nice wet area that is partial shade, where you would like, you know, to fill that in, that would be great. Okay, I threw something really wild at you now. This dragon fruit. This would be a commitment if you wanted that, because look at this huge cactus you'll have to deal with. And it is cold sensitive, so you're going to have to figure out how to cover it or bring it in. But I believe Dr. Lester at the county extension office, I believe he has a program on Hernando County Government YouTube of actually growing this dragon fruit for the purpose of consuming it, of eating it. What I'm talking about is, you know, if you want to do that, because it's work to do it. But if you want to do it to consume the actual dragon fruit, which is pretty funky looking in itself, look at this flower that you'll have with it. I mean, if anything should be added to a moonlight garden, I think this dragon fruit flower would be a fantastic addition and something worth thinking about if you are willing to stake it up and do, the stuff you have to do in order to then get some fruit out of it, and then figure out, oh, cool, how do I eat this brand new tropical kind of fruit here? Now we're going to move to our shimmering, silvery kind of plants that bring, this nice silvery glow in the evening. And this Texas sage is one of the ones that I think could do that. In its Latin name, it's leucophyllum, which means, white leaves. I think this is one where you want to put wood not anywhere near that button bush or the things that require a lot of water, because these hate water. Look at their name. The 2 words in their name tell you they're not overly fond of water. Of course, they will need some, especially to get established. The little purple flowers do tend to pop up after a rain, but they're not quite as happy in the summer as they are in our really dry times, in the fall, and right now in the spring. They make a good hedge. It says 9B through 11. They years ago at the county extension office, which is now just the Master Gardener Nursery. So it would be kind of south, inland on 41 near the Hernando County Fairgrounds. So just getting into 9B, but it was happy enough there. And it gets to be, well, taller than me, and maybe, 7-8 feet tall, and probably, I'd say 10 feet around. So if you get a bunch of them, you'll have a nice, row of beautiful, silvery, shimmery hedges that you can put instead of silverthorn, which are really finding their way on the invasive species list. And these are more attractive. Anyway, here's, I'm not sure if anyone ever thought about putting this on a Moonlight Garden list, but this, last week I called it something different. I was trying to confuse you. I called it dotted horsemint. This week I'm calling it spotted bee balm. Just checking, make sure you're paying attention. It's the same plant. It grows usually naturally as a quote weed, but as you can see, this bumblebee is in love with this weed. I think we need to plant more of our horsemint, bee balm, whatever you wish to call it, especially since around my neighborhood where it grows naturally, more and more of the natural areas are being cut down to build houses. So I believe people should be trying to replace some of those plants that are being cut down. And this is one of them, this bee balm, and has kind of late spring. When it says spring through summer flowers where I live, I'm not really going to see them till, well, there's one trying to come up, and it's only because I know what it is, mostly because I put it there. But before it starts having these flowers, it's going to look like nothing, like, yeah, what is that? So the flowers really start coming up maybe early May, somewhere in there. And this picture kind of fades them out. They have all kind of spots on these beautiful, bracts. It's just a really interesting and fun plant to bring to your Moonlight Garden, because it's going to make the bumblebees very happy in the daylight hours. Okay, you're looking at me like, now do you just want to talk about weeds? You didn't say we were coming here to talk about weeds today. And as I say, may all your wildflowers be weeds. And also, nature grew these plants for a reason. And these plants and the pollinators evolved together. You can actually go to certain nurseries to find varieties of saw palmetto, not just what nature left you, when you bought the property, but there are varieties, these 3 varieties, Sericea, Cinerea, and Glauca, all have silvery sheens to them. So might be something you want to consider. And to answer your question, because you're hearing it from the natives, we have different legends in Florida. We have the people who come down who know nothing, and then they hear all kind of wild stuff. Or there's a group of native Floridians with their own set of beliefs, some of them true, some of them urban legends. Okay, could there be rattlesnakes in the palmettos? Sure, there could be a rattlesnake in the palmetto. There could also be a rattlesnake under your hollies or under any other kind of plant. Could there be black snakes in here? Well, yeah, there could be, you know, all kinds of animals. In fact, our palmettos, our saw palmettos, are home and host and shelter and all of those things to about 450 different species of wildlife here in Florida. So that's very important. Have I personally ever, found a rattlesnake under my palmettos? No, but I've never gone crawling under them either. So there just has to be a healthy respect and a balance of nature. I can tell you that villages of birds absolutely love to spend time in my palmettos. Okay, here's another silvery, shimmery plant you might want to bring in the winter. This Dusty Miller is a winter annual here in Florida. If we go back to considering possibly a, late December, New Year's kind of outdoor party you might want to have, and we think about that Stokes aster vine climbing, emitting that sugar cookie smell, and perhaps then that's when you have the your naked white crepe myrtles with their beautiful branches and structure and the lights. Under them, you might want to consider for that time of year planting annuals or pots or containers that have this Dusty Miller that brings in, that white shimmery kind of look, at least using it as a foundation, and put poinsettias or something, on top of them. Just things to think about there. Now we're going to talk about evening fragrances, things that smell particularly in the evening. I didn't bring this one up to our Fragrantly Florida Friendly for a couple reasons, mostly because it's 10B through 11. And again, here in Hernando, we are 9A and 9B. So if you really, really, really want this angel's trumpet, you're going to have to realize it's going to be, a summer plant that very well could freeze on you. Maybe not, depending on your microclimate, or it might freeze and come back, or keep it in a pot and have to bring it in when we have freezes. It's very aromatic. Every single part of it is poison though, so be careful. If you have any critters that like to ingest any part of plants. And also, apparently, haven't heard about it in about 20 years, but it was in the news, kids would lay under them in the evenings when they drip and get a high from them. So, I don't imagine that it's a very well sustained one, but probably pretty dangerous since that's all pretty toxic. So keep that in mind. If, you want to have it in your yard and have teenage kids or something, maybe consider something else. And don't go laying under them. This one, this pinwheel flower, very fragrant, has a couple different names, crepe jasmine, I believe. And I mentioned last week, I see these as soon as I go into Pasco County, like down to Zephyr Hills, that kind of area. I see these at regular restaurants and stores and things, and I don't see them up in Hernando that much. But since a good portion of Hernando is now 9B, might be something we want to experiment with. And it does have the evening, very, very jasmine-y kind of smell. If you have a water garden, that's a whole other talk in itself, but that is a fantastic addition to a moonlight garden, having a little pond or a water garden. So one of the white flowers that you can bring into it that is native, it's your white water lily, and it has day and nighttime fragrance. Now, you don't have to just stick with white and silvery type plants. You know, anything really in the cool colors are going to stand out. And of course, your moonlight garden, you want to build it with daytime and nighttime in mind. So yeah, have your interesting textures as well as your, you know, your blues, purples, you know, even creamy yellows. Isn't really a cool color, but it kind of stands out at night too. All of those together will make it, you know, a pleasant place to be in the daytime as well as in the evening. So that's just a few of the plants, and I hope it has got your, you know, your thinking caps going about, oh, well, what about this plant? What about that plant? And for those of you listening live, I'm going to address what you have in the chat after we turn the recording back off, and we can talk some more about it. But so the other elements that you need to think about if you're building this outdoor space, this outdoor living space, I'm sure you have plenty of ideas, and there are plenty of ideas out there, Pinterest and everywhere else. But just a few things to help it stand out at night, in the evening. I might want to think about white or even the silvery containers to hold the plants, to stand out, you know, to be more light. And they make that glow in the dark paint. Now, I wouldn't go crazy putting that everywhere. It might be overkill, but you know, on a few of the planters or on some of your pavers, also to help make it look interesting, but for safety reasons too. Just something, you know, to have fun with and try out. Those vines I've showed you, the moon vine, the climbing aster, use white arbors for those vines, so that also stands out at night until the plant covers it up. But you know, to for safety, and also just to, you know, for the lights to bounce off of nicely. And when we're talking about paths that we want to walk along in these gardens, white gravel, seashells, light seashells, something that's going to, you know, stand out and be lighter and brighter. You can use fountains for that soothing water sound. And we talked about even some of the water lilies, and there's the white native one. You can add in others as well. That would be, you know, lovely sitting around in the evening under some of the lights and hearing that water movement as well. LED string lights, they can go anywhere. I already talked about them, putting them up some of the crepe myrtles. Now, I've seen rows of crepe myrtles like going into gated communities, and what they do is they take the netted string lights and they only do like the trunks. And to me, it looks odd, but you know, that might be what you like. To me, what I see when they're only doing the trunks with these netted white lights is it looks like a, you know, the bandage that you put around when you have sprained your leg or something. You know, looks like each one of those have that on it. I would, you know, use the strings to put more through the branches, like they do in some of the restaurants, and, you know, and have more fun with that. And you can keep that going year round. Another thing I've seen someone do is a very creative master gardener. He did all kind of fun stuff around his yard, but he had a dead shrub once. You know, what are you going to do with a dead shrub? Well, most of us are going to throw it away or, you know, put it in the compost bin or something. Nope. He dug it up. He worked all the dirt, you know, off of the root ball. It was dead. It was dead, 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 you know, just branches. He turned it upside down. He hung it upside down, putting some string light through it over one of his outdoor tables, and he called it a chandelier. So, probably didn't last more than a couple of years, but it was still fun. So we can think of fun things to do like that. And while we're talking about lights, the solar lights, you can pick those up anywhere to line your paths or to put in your garden beds. So, we have that nice light, and they come in basically any style, that you could be looking for. So while we're talking about being outside at night in Florida, we can't talk about that without bringing up mosquitoes. I mean, that's just a fact of life. So what are we going to do about mosquitoes outside at night? Well, the first thing is don't be a skeeter breeder. Don't breed them during the regular hours so they're not as plentiful in the evening. So some tips to do that: if you have bird baths, that's wonderful. You want to flush them out with new water and scrub around the edges here. I have a scrubber brush near the hose that refills my bird bath, because the eggs, they can lay the eggs just above the water line. So scrub them out, get new water in there every 3 or 4 days. If you happen to have bromeliads, and some of them might have some nice interesting texture and silvery looks, well, they hold water. That's what they're created to do. So, and they attract a lot of mosquitoes. They really do. Even if they're native, they still attract a lot of mosquitoes. So if you want to have them, you can actually go and purchase what they call mosquito dunks. You can go to basically any garden center and ask for mosquito dunks. They come like in round donut looking things that you can crumble up and spread throughout your bromeliads. What that is, it has something called Bacillus thuringiensis, which is the easy name of it is BT, small b, capital T. It is a bacteria that, for the mosquitoes, what it does is it stops them from ever going beyond the first stage. They never turn into full-grown mosquitoes. So they just, die. They die early on. So, and that's all that does. Now, some of the BT also, you need to be aware of this. BT in general, that isn't labeled specifically for mosquitoes, or black fly, I think is what that type is. There's another type of BT that only kills caterpillars. So be careful what you get, because that might be good if you're trying to protect your vegetable garden, but if you want butterflies, you don't want to kill caterpillars. So be real careful what you get with that. Also with those bromeliads, treat it like your bird bath. Maybe do it, set a pattern of doing it at the same time. Get your hose and flush them out. Get that old water out of there, and flush out anything that might be trying to hatch in there. Tires hanging around your yard, they have amnesty days to get rid of those, or you can take them to the landfill. I think you have 10 you can take up there before you start paying more. Anything at all around your yard that's holding water, you want to dump that. In fact, today's Wednesday, and Wednesday's supposed to be dump day for any mosquitoes. Toys, tarps on top of boats, those little pockets that they hold, that holds just a little tiny bit of water. Walk around your yard, especially if you plan on spending time out there in the evening. You got to make it part of your routine to go out there and see what's holding water and dump it and get rid of it. Sometimes it's a hole in a tree, so you may need to fill that hole with sand or get rid of the tree. Anything like that. You need to be dog bowls, anything that's holding water regularly. Some of those, I mentioned having a fountain, moving water is a good thing. The mosquito larvae can't hold on, and attach and do its thing to moving water. So if you have fountains or things like that, make sure they're operational and that they're always moving that water. Keep your gutters clean. See, that's probably something you hadn't really thought about, but you're sitting there near them. So keep those gutters clean. Any outdoor spigots that you have that are leaking, pay attention to all of those things so you don't have any standing water, so you can enjoy your time outdoors. Other things, and this is, from the University of Florida, as well as from mosquito control, that you can do to avoid problems with mosquitoes is cover up. I know in the summer that's kind of difficult, but maybe real light, cottony kind of clothes, the more covered you are, the less the mosquitoes can get to you. Using a product with DEET is found to be the most effective. And it depends on the person. Even mosquito control will tell you, more science is proving that each person has their own different kind of chemical makeup. And, if you think, gosh, Betty never gets bit, and I always do, that could be true. It could be something to do with your chemical makeup. So maybe, different lotions work for you that might not work for another person. But in general, over average, they have found things that, if it has DEET, that you put on your own body, that seems to be the most effective. If you have the pond that I talked about, moving water is the best thing. But did you know Hernando County Mosquito Control will bring you these little gambusia fish? They're called mosquito fish. They're little tiny gambusia. There's their phone number, 352-540-6552. If you have a little pond, a water garden, a pool that you're not using, you don't want to drain it, but no one's going to be in it for a long time, you can't get the pump fixed, something like that, they breed these fish at their facility. They'll bring them to you for free. So there's no reason, not to partake in that program. Different screens. If you don't have a screened porch attached to your house, a lot of people buy those tent-like, screened in rooms to have a better place to sit when mosquitoes are especially bothersome. Or you can, create a kind of different, screening yourself in. This is interesting. They have found that the use of fans work pretty well because the mosquitoes are pretty weak flyers. So if you are sitting in a certain area, and this, would be very pleasant if it's the warmer it gets, and you have a lot of fans going around you, you will have less mosquitoes bothering you. And you want to encourage the things such as dragonflies that consume the mosquitoes. How do you do that? Do you say, here, dragonfly, dragonfly, dragon? No, how you do that is by not spraying pesticides around. That will kill the allies that are trying to help you out. That is the main way. We're going to get a little bit into that as well. But first, let's talk about the things that don't work when it comes to mosquito prevention. Mosquito repelling plants. I know you are crestfallen now because especially these kind of crowds, you want it to be so. You want the plants. You want there to be plants that will repel the mosquitoes. And some have some repelling properties, but what usually happens is they work for a little bit until the mosquitoes get used to their presence. So they're not a long-term kind of fix. Bug zappers, sure, they zap mosquitoes and any other kind of insect. You know it, you've seen it, you've seen you know, all sorts of bug bodies all stuck to those bug zappers. They're, you know, not discriminatory. They just kill everything. And again, we might be killing some of our allies as well as the mosquitoes. You consuming garlic, vitamin B, bananas, things like that. Again, everybody's chemical makeup is different, but in general, the university's tests have found those things to be ineffective. The same with repellent wristbands. There's a nice picture UF has, I didn't add it here, of one of those repellent wristbands on someone's wrist with a mosquito standing right beside it, like, whew, cool. Ultrasonic devices, they don't work for anything. They don't fall for that, for those, for anything, as well as the fake dragonflies. You want to have real dragonflies and you want them to feel welcome in your yard. And the way you do that is by reducing your chemical use, reducing or even eliminating your chemical use. Take advantage of dragonflies and those other insects, even bats, that eat the mosquitoes. Some moths will be attracted to those nighttime bloomers that we talked about. You don't want to attract these things, you know, to an ambush of pesticides. So you want it to be a safe place that you all can enjoy. The bats that are going to be coming around, at least right at, you know, nightfall, what do they eat? They eat insects. Do you want those insects that they're eating to be poisoned? So, you know, you really got to think about these kind of things. If you're having some major issues, you can actually have mosquito control come out to your house and do a walk around. You won't get in any trouble and it doesn't cost you anything. You can just say, you know, there's some kind of problem here. Maybe they'll find tires in the woods near you, or, you know, maybe they'll find it's something in your own yard that you overlooked. So that's one thing you can do. But also diatomaceous earth will work sometimes for a little bit on some of like the gnats and you know, things that are on the ground. The thing is with that, you know, when it rains, it's going to be gone. So it will be a temporary measure. Make sure you get the food grade, not the pool grade, diatomaceous earth. And that is safe, you know, for anybody who's walking on it or anything such as that. Might have some effect. The best effect is that prevention of the mosquitoes and protecting your own body personally. So to wrap it up with our Moonlight Gardens, we want you to have fun choosing the white and the silver plants and flowers, and you can use what I talked about or some other ideas of your own. Remember that other cool type colors, your blues, your purples, can stand out as well. Even creamy yellow can stand out. Right plant, right place. You got to put the plants where the plants want to be. And think about adding more, you know, white touches to the hardscape in your landscape. You know, the paths of white gravel or shell, painting some of the containers that are holding the plants in white or even a glow in the dark white. You know, it'd be a lot of fun. Be creative with that lighting and the string lighting and the LED and just see what fun you can have with it. Don't be a skeeter breeder and reduce your chemical use so that everyone can enjoy that garden party out there, you as well as the critters of the night. Here are some of the resources that I used to put this together. And I said I can send you a PDF of this where you can find out that information. We have more classes coming up. These next 3 Wednesday classes are at 10 a.m. On Zoom, virtual classes. Next week, we're going to be with Dr. Lester, and he will be discussing how to maintain your irrigation system. Blah. That's not that interesting to me, but we do need to talk about it because it is important that people do it correctly. There are people out there who are going to have irrigation systems. It's going to happen. So it's my job to make sure that they are watering efficiently, which is principle number 2 with Florida friendly landscaping. Principle number 3 is fertilizing appropriately. So on the 29th, Dr. Lester is coming back to talk about the what, when, where, and why of fertilizing Florida yards. Again, not an exciting subject to me. It's not wildlife or fragrant flowers or Moonlight Gardens, but it is something that people are going to do. So we have to make sure you're going to do it correctly. And Dr. Lester will be back joining me for that. And on April 5th, we're going to celebrate Florida Friendly Landscaping's 30th birthday by showing you where you can go online. You can go right now and look and pledge to go Florida friendly. And we're going to talk about all the steps you can take to do that. So, and we have something fun coming up on April 22nd. For those who live in Hernando County or nearby, come join us from 9 to noon at the Hernando County Master Gardener Nursery on Oliver Street near the Hernando County Fairgrounds. We're going to have an Earth Day celebration. We'll have workshops, macro photography workshops, propagation of native plants, as well as a pruning demonstration. Audubon will be there with bee houses and bluebird houses. Mosquito control, so you can check me, see if everything I told you was correct. They will be there. Hernando County Emergency Management, as well as Hernando County Stormwater. This is a free event. Everything about it is free, except you can purchase plants at the nursery, and you can purchase those bee houses and bird houses from Audubon. Here is my social media, my Facebook page, as well as if you go to Hernando County Government YouTube, go back there. This program will be on there soon. There's over 100 Florida friendly landscaping programs on there. So you should be able to get lots of questions answered from one of those programs. Again, here's my emails where you can contact me. The first one is LillyB, L-I-L-L, 2 L's in the middle, Lilly B at hernandocounty.us. So thank you everyone for listening. I'm going to turn off the recording now and address the chat, but everyone else have a wonderful Florida friendly week.